I tell people I don't usually do this because I have a little boy at home and he doesn't like it when mommy leaves, and I get paid the same to be here as if I were back in Reading right now. But Deb was so convincing when she reached out to me and she said, we really need these tools, Kelly. And my heart, and I truly have always believed my purpose for being on this planet is to affect change and to change lives. And so that's why I'm here, because I want to give you tools that will change your lives and will most definitely change the lives of the youth that you work with. This is my husband, Christian. We just celebrated our 20-year wedding anniversary in October. This is our son, Xavier, and Xavier is now 9 years old. I need to update that photo. We adopted Xavier at birth. He was a Shasta County foster adopt baby, and when we got the call, the social worker kept going on and saying, these are very young parents, Kelly. They're very young parents. And I said, okay, I'm getting that. I said, and I had to take a deep breath. I said, I'm also getting this intuitive sense like I know one of these young parents. And she said, well, actually you do. The birth father is Jamal, and she told me this young man's last name. And it was one of those, even now I can feel it in my throat. I had to take a breath or I was gonna cry, right? I said, you're kidding me. And she said, no. Jamal and his girlfriend are pregnant and they can't keep their baby. They asked us to find a family who couldn't have children, didn't have children, would put their boy in sports and would send them photos. And then I got to tell her, I said, her name was Tammy. I said, Tammy, do you know that Jamal is the only student in my this is my 31st year of being an educator, but back then, 9 years ago, I said, Jamal is the only student I ever gave my personal cell phone number to. When I was a literacy coach at a K-5 campus, I worked with him in interventions in 4th and 5th grade, and then I became the vice principal at Parsons, the middle school, when he came to be a 6th grader. When you're a VP, you handle all the behaviors. So he was in my office a lot, and I became really close with him. In January, the police department came and took him into custody because they had just taken his mom into custody. So he went to go to the middle school across the river, and he was crying, and I was crying. So this is Jamal's baby, who we adopted. His story is one of miracles, and I could share more stories, but I just wanted to give you the gist of, we're gonna talk about DNA today, and I had the rare opportunity to spend like 2.5 years with his birth father. So I got to know his tendencies. I got to learn his facial expressions, his ways of dealing with stress, right? And now I'm raising his son. From day one, he's been with us, yet I see all of these same tendencies and thought patterns and behaviors that I did in his birth father. So we're gonna dive a little bit deep this morning for you to kind of consider your own DNA, but this little guy has been my greatest teacher. And let me not forget to mention, this is Ranger Girl and Tater Tot, our sweet, sweet baby bugs. Anybody that has labs, Tater looked like a tater tot when he was born, so that's how he got his name. So the 31 years of education have spanned, I started in preschool, I taught every grade K-8. I was a literacy coach for 4 years, California Reading Literature Project. I traveled all over the state, and then became vice principal at our middle school, and then was school site principal at a K-5 campus. I was telling Dan, I was there for 5 years and it felt like 10. Woo, it was high trauma, like all the things. In my 5th year, Shasta County Office of Ed reached out and said, hey, you have all this expertise in literacy, come be a part of our team. We have a huge issue in literacy, with literacy in Shasta County. And I knew at the time that that was where I was supposed to go next, because I knew I was supposed to have a larger impact with the tools I'd been given. But what happened in the first year with Shasta County was, we did a book study, we did all these things around literacy, we did so many things, and then we did all of our assessments, because we had all of our schools on board to do the same early literacy assessments, and we were tracking how are we doing. After a full year of that, we got the results, and they hadn't even changed 1 percentile. And I sat in my office and cried, right? And then somebody started sending me all this literature about trauma and ACEs and adverse childhood experiences and how it affects the developing brain, and I was like, what? So all my direction shifted to this. So Shasta County Office of Ed, this is my 12th year with them. I've been trained in IIRP, restorative practices. I'm an ACEs master trainer. You guys are familiar with ACEs in this area, yeah? So youth mental health first aid, trust-based relational intervention, the neurosequential model of education with Dr. Bruce Perry, If any of you are familiar with that, that is really the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. I'm a Hope Navigator, Positive Behavioral Intervention Support. So let me go to our agenda here. First, a grounding. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. I'm sure many of you are familiar. They are the vetting system for all things social and emotional. For Shasta County Office of Ed, I'm the lead for social emotional learning. We don't do anything without the 3 signature practices. So the 3 signature practices that's very scientifically based. The first part is the inclusive welcome, which we're going to do here in just a couple minutes. The second signature practice is all of the interactive activities that we do when we're together. Things like a regulation break, things like turn and talk or walk and talk to process a new concept that you have just learned and you're trying to digest. Ways to engage the brain, essentially. And then the third is the intentional closing, which is an opportunity to take like a full circle look at all the content you've learned. How is that settled with you? Are you still wondering about some of it? Are you like super excited and inspired? It's just a way to look back to see what was most meaningful. We do this with all of the adults that we work with. We do it in classrooms, and it quite literally like creates new neural pathways when you've done it over a period of time. During COVID, my team and I would meet every morning at 9 a.m. and we would do the 3 signature practices, and then COVID ended and we were out in public and I'd be in a meeting and somebody wouldn't do an inclusive welcome and I'd be like all bent out of shape. Wait, I don't feel grounded yet. I don't feel like a sense of belonging yet. So it's really impactful, and it teaches you to then be really authentic with yourself. The way that we bring ourselves to any space matters greatly. Like before I even got up and talked with all of you today, I have a visualization that I do. I do a grounding. I won't get into it, but it's very intentional so that I show up my very best version of myself for you in my most authentic way so that you're able to be invited to do the same. So that you're invited to do the same. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna touch on DNA, the sequence of engagement. If I were queen for the day, I would go to every teacher credentialing program and I would teach this concept. We have no business sending teachers into the classroom without having them understand this core science of how we reach the thinking brain. I can't just show up and start teaching a math lesson to y'all. I mean, we have got to be biologically respectful of ourselves and of our students that we're trying to teach content to. We'll talk about co-regulation. That's a big deal. And co-regulation, all these things have to do with behavior. I don't know about you, but we have teachers leaving the profession because they cannot handle the behavior and they don't have the right tools to navigate it. These are key tools that are hugely making a difference in our community. Sensory profiles, holy. I just got trained in TBRI in January, gave up a couple weekends. It is changing my world and everyone else's world in our community. We've got more people trained now, all about sensory work. How many IEP special ed teachers in the room? Anybody? As an administrator, how many? He's all, hey, put your, that's you. How many, let's just say, how many IEPs or SST meetings do you think you've been to over the years, right? Where we had an OT, or like the only time we talk about occupational therapy or really like sensory work, proprioceptive, vestibular, is when we're talking about a student on an IEP. Well, that's changed. Now we're talking about it whole class. And you guys, we are seeing dramatic differences in learning, in behavior, in teacher well-being. It is crazy amazing. And then how many of you have been trained in conscious discipline? You could just give a thumbs up if you're familiar with conscious discipline or Becky Bailey. She's outstanding. So this is a tool from Becky Bailey, but we've modified it a little bit to match the regions of the brain from the neurosequential model, from the sequence of engagement. And then we're going to go deeper. So there's a lot of content, but you are going to engage in all of it, and you are going to have time to process all of it. So here are the objectives. Our brain loves to know where we're going. I'll let you look over those. Here we go. So this is our grounding. We know, and I wish that somebody in all of those hundreds of SST meetings that I had attended, when like the counselor or somebody would always say, so I'm working with him on his breathing. And in my head, I'd be like, why aren't you working with him on behavior? Oh, so when you slow your breath, it sends a chemical message to your brain that you're safe and you can relax and you have access to your cortex? Oh, okay, let's do that then. So this is an invitation just to sit where you are. Every one of you that's here today, there's a reason you're here. I like to sit with my feet grounded, closed eyes, soft eyes, whatever you're comfortable with. It's just an invitation to take a few deep breaths, those belly breaths with an exhale through a drop jaw. And when you extend that exhale, it adds to the physiological experience. Just swim in a place of gratitude. Who and what do you love most? What are you grateful for? We're going to just take a few breaths and then we'll come back. So now, our inclusive welcome. I know you started with good things. Like, I don't know, 5 years ago, I was asked to give the keynote for all of our high school teachers in this huge auditorium, and sometimes high school teachers are really intimidating, so I was like, ah. But they were kind, and I did the tell me something good. And one of the teachers went back and started, using that in all of her classes, and she ran into me 3 months later and said, Kelly, I have to tell you, in my 20 years of being a high school teacher, that's the most powerful shift I've ever made in my classroom. Changes like the synergy in the room, and if I don't do it, my students remind me, hey, we didn't do good things. We forgot to do good things, even if it's like 2 minutes out of your day, because it really does change your neurochemicals when you're focusing on something that's positive and what you're thankful for. So for you, what you're looking forward to over the break, because it's 1 day away, yes? Are you guys working tomorrow? Okay, so 1 day away. So either with one other person or maybe 3 other people, each person's going to share for about a minute and then we'll come back. Sound good? The science behind what we just did. I trust that you probably sat near people that you're somewhat familiar with. Yeah? So we are very relational creatures. So when we slow down enough to connect with others and focus on something positive and share something that's meaningful to us, something that we're going to do, it might evoke laughter, even better, like the oxytocin that is created in our bodies when we laugh together, when we share together. It is both regulating and it's connecting, and it prepares us to have our cortex be open for business. You'll see me do this. You'll see Dr. Perry do this. This is a model of the sequence of engagement, and the cortex, of course, is the upper region of the brain, but that's what we want. I don't want to waste your time. It's really stressful to be off campus when you're a school leader. I want every moment that you're here today to be valuable, so I want your brain to be fully present and online, right? That's my selfish goal. So now we're going to go, just for a little segment of time, we're going to talk about DNA, right? So this is actually an ACE's master trainer slide, but I like to use it because it really talks about the fact that, like if I were pregnant right now with a little girl, that little girl would be carrying eggs. It's literally like impacting 3 generations all at once. When we have those pregnant mamas, we have got to do a better job of educating them about what their thoughts and their emotions do to that developing fetus that's growing inside of them. Every research study that I've read, every book that I've read talks about that. It's a really big deal. In fact, when we talk about sensory profiles, every one of us in this room has a different sensory profile that was created in utero. When children show up in our environment and they have, like, my son, he's like constantly this. And then our family is like, Xavier, stop tapping. And what I've taught them is, actually, he's just self-regulating. Offer him an alternative way to receive that same input. I'll be like, buddy, you can tap your fingers. You can tap your leg. You can tap your heel. I know you're seeking that input and it's helping you to calm down. So here are some other ways you can do that so you don't make everyone crazy, right? And now my family is like, oh, he's regulating so that he stays calm and he's gonna behave well. Okay, let's remind him other ways he can tap to get that same input. So the next slide shows a book, but I'm not gonna go to it just yet because it gives the answer. But I want to tell you, there's a book that I think I'm on chapter 13 right now, and it is changing my life. There's a study in the book, and it may be a familiar study to you. It has to do with lab mice. And apparently mice, I didn't know this, share like 99% of the same DNA markers as humans. I have no idea how that's possible. But because in this way that it is, they're able to do these experiments and they get results pretty quickly, as opposed to us as humans, it takes slower. You get the point. So here's what they do. And not that I love this, because I love animals, but here are these male mice. And every time the smell of cherry blossoms, I don't know why cherry blossom scent, but every time that scent is flooded into their cage, they are delivered a little shock. And then they follow the development of the DNA methylation of the brain, of how it develops after this extended period of time of this correlation of a shock with this smell, right? And then these male mice are bred, and these pups, baby mice, are called pups. So the pups are taken, they're in the same lab, but they're in a separate cage over here. Never before have they experienced this cherry blossom shock experience, right? So they flood the cage of these baby pups with the smell of cherry blossoms. And guess what they do? They seize up, anticipating something really negative that's about to happen. So how's that possible? They've never lived that experience like their fathers did. But now here they go, they smell the smell, and they're seized up. So just turn and talk to somebody for a couple minutes. What do you think about that? Why would that be? So everyone that knows me knows that I always wear rose-colored glasses. My glasses always half full. I think it's just how I came wired up in the world. So here's the good news about that. And this is how it transfers to us and our students. The behavioral effects of a traumatic event can express for 3 generations, but perhaps not beyond that. Here's how we shift it. Trauma symptoms could be reversed in the mice after they lived in a positive, low-stress environment as adults. Not only did the mice's behavior improve, they also experienced changes in DNA methylation, which prevented symptoms from being transmitted to the next generation. Right? So, this book, it didn't start with you. Our associate superintendent brought it to me and said, Kelly, this has a lot to do with the work that you're doing. And so I've been listening to it on Audible. I have a copy of it. I bought a copy for my mom and my sister. And what I would say to you is this. If you're at a place in your life where you're feeling a little stuck, or you have some wonderings about your own deep-held beliefs or thoughts or behaviors, and you can't quite make sense of it, this author will make sense of it for you. He will link it back. There's a whole process he takes you through with the type of vocabulary that you use. He gives the example of a 9-year-old her suicide ideation is like ridiculous. She's 9 and they bring her to see him and he starts talking to her, and in their conversation she says, most days I just feel like I should be incinerated. He's like, whoa, that's a very unusual word for a 9-year-old young lady to be using. And he does the research. Well, half of her ancestors were incinerated in Auschwitz. She's Jewish, right? So she doesn't know that. Like, no one ever used that word in her living days, but it's in her DNA. So when he's able, it gives me goosebumps. Whoo, look at those guys. When he's able to help her link that deep-held feeling of suicide ideation to her ancestors, and she's able to make sense of it, the brain is a pattern seeker. When she does that, she's able to move past that. She now doesn't need to take any form of medication to wash those ideas out of her head. Those ideas are out of her head, because then she's able to go through a process of letting that go. That's not mine, that was my ancestors. So that's the kind of deep work. I was listening to some of it as I was driving last night. I was like, ooh, I pressed pause on that. And I just had to it hurts my brain a little bit to think about all of the connections and the possibilities, but I've been able to find 2 really key answers to behaviors in my own life by doing this work. So it is messy work, I won't lie, but it is very healing work. So I just invite you into that if it's a place in your life where, because look, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He said, feed the teachers so they don't eat the students, right? Feed the administrators and the leaders so they don't eat the teachers. It's just the same. You guys, I know what it's like to walk in your shoes, and it is messy work. It is gut-wrenching work. But if we don't do it, who will? Like, we are the change agents. You are creating the future of our world in the work that you do every day. It takes one caring adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. That's who we are and what we do, right? I'm in classrooms all over my county, working with young people, working with educators to help them understand this science, and it changes lives. I'll never forget, I was, another one of, I should create a list of all the books I've read that have been life-changing, but Nadine Burke-Harris, she used to be our Surgeon General here in California. She wrote a book, The Deepest Well, and I was driving, I forget where I was driving to go do a workshop, 5 years ago, and Xavier was 4 at the time. And she talks about these mice who, they would take these mama mice who are heavy lickers, it means they're heavy nurturers, and then they would take these mama mice who are light lickers that are not very nurturing, and they would switch the babies. So they'd take the babies from the heavy licking mama and give it to the light licker, and vice versa, because it's a DNA thing. And what she says is, again, a goosebump moment, she says when they took these baby mice from the light licking mamas and put them with the heavy licking mamas, the really nurturing mamas, it changed their DNA, it changed their behavior. So I call my husband, it's like 10 o'clock at night, I'm cheerful, I'm like, babe, I'm a heavy licker, X-Jake's gonna be okay. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? You're a heavy licker. Because I'm so nurturing, and I had all these misgivings and wonderings about how he was gonna turn out. But it's environment and nature, nurture, it's both. It's both. But thank you for that question. All right, so this is a short 2-minute video from Harvard.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
How does that science inform your work? And why don't we stand and talk to someone about this, because you've been sitting for too long. You don't normally sit for this long. How does that science inform your work?
Yeah.
All right. So what we know is that the brain develops in a use-dependent way, right? So if I'm a child and I am in a home where I'm experiencing a persistent state of being triggered, I'm going to use an example of a family. When I was school site principal on the K-5 campus, Rother, there was a family, the son was a 5th grader, the daughter was a 3rd grader, dad was an alcoholic, and he would come home and he would get physical with mom, right? Little sister, 3rd grader, couldn't tolerate it. She would go hide in the closet and she would disassociate, right? That's what she would do. That's what her brain would do. Brother would go and get in between mom and dad, and he'd try to protect mom. So he would become hyper aroused. He would become really big to try to protect mom. So now, take him to a school campus. What does that look like at school, right? Because when a brain has developed in a use-dependent way. And when you're triggered, you disassociate, or when you're triggered, you become hyper-aroused. The 5th grader, my staff wanted me to send him to community day school because he appeared as being oppositional defiant, ADHD, and what I knew was the backstory. I knew their file with Child Family Services was like this thick. But what would happen with the 3rd grader, she'd be in reading groups with her teacher who she loved, and she'd be struggling with comprehension. You guys, she was literally having little mini seizures. The teacher said, Kelly, you have to come check this out. So I'd sit so she didn't know that I was watching her, and I'd watch her. She would blank out for a little bit, and then she'd come back in. Why? Because she loved her teacher so much, and she really wanted to understand what was happening. And it was so stressful to her because her brain's a pattern seeker, and her brain had been in the pattern of disassociating when she experienced stress. That it affects blood flow to the brain. Like, we had the health nurse come in, we had mental health come in. That is what was happening as a triggered trauma response. Her brother, in math class, his teacher at the time was really sarcastic, even though I would pull him aside and I'd say, hey, when you say things like that to the students, this is the impact it has on them. Is there something you could say instead? But this young man, 5th grader, was really triggered by the sarcasm that this teacher would use, and he would become hyper-aroused. And it looked as though he was, a really bad kid, when really it was just a pattern. So is that making sense? It literally changes the way the brain hardwires. And it impacts, like if you're thinking about a student that you might have like as a frequent flyer that you're struggling with, all of these types of behaviors are what show up because of how the brain hardwires, right? Taking the perspective of another, cause and effect, executive function skill. And I was telling Deb, we'll talk more about towards the end of our morning. And by the way, every hour we will take a 5-minute break because we're not used to sitting like this. And if we feel halfway through we need a longer break, we'll take a longer break. There is coffee up here and yummy creamer. There are breakfast burritos, so we want you to please enjoy these things and take care of yourself. So these are the kinds of things that we see when we have students that we're working with who come from homes of toxic stress. And toxic stress means that it's ongoing. You might have an adverse childhood experience where it just happened one time. That will be impactful, but more impactful is when you have an ongoing experience of toxic stress. All right, so here's where I'm going to invite you into an activity. This is something we do in classrooms, but I'm going to invite you into it. This is one of Castle's 3 signature practices, an engaging activity, and it's really fun. Deb, will you come up here with me and I'm gonna model it? So we go back to back, and I'll count you down. I'm gonna say 3, 2, 1, and so now we're gonna jump around and look at each other in just a second. And Deb, do you wanna do addition or multiplication?
Let's do addition.
Addition. So we'll do addition for everyone in the room. She's gonna have a number on her hand, and I'm gonna have a number on my hand, and whoever adds them up first and says it out loud is the one that wins that battle round, okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. 10.
I thought they were having to do it.
Oh, let's try it again. Okay, we'll try it again. Okay, here.
Because I want to win.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1.
4.
Okay. So right on you. That is 5 and then 2. I've never had that happen before. You and I are linked up somehow, woman.
We
Woo.
are.
All right, so let's see. Find a partner, and if you don't have a partner, I will partner with you. We're just going to do this like 3 times. Sound good? Yeah. All right, let's try this out. Dr. Perry says the brain takes a cognitive break about every 15 minutes, whether we like it or not. So there's only so much content the brain can take in. So that's a way of weaving laughter in and fun, but also using some academic content to give the brain a break from taking in knowledge and then to come back, right? I was with the TKK classroom, and afterwards the feedback I gave her was, because I go and I basically, they will call me and say, hey, we're really wondering about this student. So I will go hang out and spend a couple hours just shadowing the student to pick up on patterns of their behavior, and then we sit down and create a success plan, and then I go back, and anyway, that's just one of the things that I do. But what I said to the teacher was, with this class, if I'm the teacher in this classroom, I am going to invest at least 1 minute of my time every 15 minutes just to re-regulate everybody. Even if it's So like, let's all together just hum You Are My Sunshine. Ready, set, go. Right there in that tiny little amount of time, we just brought fresh oxygen to your brain, which helps to wake you up. We vibrated your vagus nerve, which is very satisfying when we're seeking input. We just did something we were a part of something larger than ourselves, which builds community, and we did rhythm. The fastest way to calm the stress response system is to do anything in rhythm, because it mimics the in utero heartbeat. And when we were all developing in utero, we were never hungry, we were never cold, our needs were always met. So it takes the brain chemistry back to a time of safety. In fact, if I have a student who's completely blown out, I used to think, oh, I'll just go be relational with them and that will help calm them down and bring them back. Nope. Actually, science says, play some music, go for a walk with them, next to them, weave something in that mimics the heartbeat, because that will biologically help calm them down faster than anything else will. So, now we're gonna get to the sequence of engagement. I teach this we teach this to students, we teach this to adults. Every summer I work with our Upward Bound students, our high school students. I also work with our independent study students, our high school students. I also work with our juvenile court school students. And I teach them this science. You know, it's funny, it's not funny, it's kind of sad actually. On days when I'm with our juvenile court school students and I do these mini lessons on the brain, they rarely do this, they ask for paper and pencil because they want to write it down, because they feel so out of control in their lives. They want to know tools that are going to help them get control. And that's what this does. So excited to share with you the sequence of engagement. And this is a brain heuristic that Dr. Perry created after years and years and years of working with parents. And basically it goes like this. This is the brainstem. The brainstem and the diencephalon are kind of like this lower region of the brain. Then we move up into the limbic region. This is everything that's like regulatory. It's all your senses. It's what do you see, feel, hear, taste, touch. We move up here, and how do you feel relationally? Do you experience a sense of safety? Do you experience a sense of belonging? And then up into the cortex of, well, that's where we know we do our higher order level thinking. We know we do our deep communicating in that region of the brain. And what I was telling Deb is that if you have funding, we had CalHOPE FEMA funding at Shasta County Office of Ed. So we spent a lot of that to get people trained in the neurosequential model. I had been trained 9 years ago, so I became an advanced trainer. So now I'm training 10 employees within one school district to have access to this science. But one of the tools that you gain when you're trained, and I promise I don't work for the company and I don't gain anything from this, it's just been so powerful in our community. We're onboarding 3 schools this year. We onboarded a school last year. You have access to a tool called a mind map, a functional mind map. And basically we ask 10 questions of the student. These are tier 2 behavior students that you would do a functional map for. And it's 10 questions. It asks how well do they regulate on a scale of 1 to 4. How are their fine motor, gross motor? How are they relational? It asks relational questions. And then how are they in math? How are they in reading? How are they in communication? And then it gives us like a heat map, right? And when we see a 1 down here, and when we see 1s and 2s here, which is common, we know that relational issues have occurred for this child. There was a 6th grader in the spring that we mapped, and the teacher was ready to completely quit and give up because she was so frustrated with this young man. After we did a map, and I said, hey, check out the limbic region of his brain. These are common behaviors that go along with that kind of disorganization. I went back a week later. She said, oh, he and I don't have any issues now. I get it now. I get it that he's behaving that way because he has had things happen to him that have been awful. And it's not personal. And she was able to then use the strategies, the evidence-based strategies that go along with a functional map, to begin to help him. And it's like being a neurosurgeon from the outside in. My best friend's dad is a neurosurgeon, so he laughs when I say that. But I get to be a neurosurgeon too from the outside in by applying these strategies to help reorganize the areas of disorganization. So, but for our context, I'm a teacher in a classroom, or I'm a school site principal with my staff. If I show up, let's just say, for your context, I'm a school site principal. If I'm having a bad day and I come to a staff meeting and I'm all pissed off, my staff is going to feel that from me, right? So what I do is I carefully do my own practice of my breathing, my visualization, whatever I am doing, so that I can show up and I'm regulated and I feel grounded and I feel calm, because we're very contagious. There's an upcoming slide that talks about it, but we have these things called mirror neurons, which make us very contagious as human beings to a very deep level. So I'm regulated. Now I will come into a staff meeting and I will do what we did. I will say, let's do some grounding, let's do some breathing, let's do an inclusive welcome, let's talk about things that are going well. So I'm now inviting them to be regulated. So now I'm regulated, so by virtue of that, it's easier for them to be regulated. And now I just intentionally invited them to do an activity with me that helpfully regulated them. And we might hum a song, we might do the back-to-back, there are any number of things we might do. Now that we're all regulated, ding, now we have access to the midbrain, the limbic region, where we can do relationally safe activities. We might toss a ball, we might, if you're really desperate, show like a silly cat video or a video that will evoke laughter. That's a great way too to like relationally bring everyone together. If a teacher is playing a silly cat video when you walk in, don't judge them. When students feel relationally safe and that sense of belonging, ding, now you have access to the cortex. Now you can take them to the moon and back. But here's the rub. There is no physiological way to get to this region of the brain except through the lower regions. We figured out when we were like that first year we were trying to change reading scores, we'd be using SIPs or Read Naturally or like any number of evidence-based interventions, right? We would take these little babies out into the hallway, our lowest below grade level readers, read, spell, read, spell, read, spell. Well, never once did we say, hey, what'd you eat for breakfast this morning? Hey, Deb, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy you're at school today. Hey guys, let's all do the butterfly before we get started today. Let's do some heartbeat and some breathing before we get started today, because we want to make sure our brain is ready to do this work that we're going to do, this important work to build our brain where reading and literacy is concerned. We weren't doing any of that. We didn't understand that you have to be biologically respectful in order to reach the part of the brain that does the most important part of thinking. Does that make sense? So let's do this. Let me see what the next slide is. Little foreshadow. When we come back from our break, you're going to have an opportunity to personally do a success plan for yourself. And I want you to take it with you. You're going to write it down. You're going to talk to somebody about it. And you're going to have an opportunity to self-reflect. What do you do to regulate yourself? Like, what's your go-to? You might have on your phone pictures of grandbabies or of your pet, like I do, Tater Tot and Ranger Girl, or of Xavier laughing, or something like that, that helps me, brings me back to like true north. So you're gonna have time to do that, but real quick, I'll show you this slide. They just figured this out in 1995, by the way, in a lab in Italy. At least that's what my teachers have shared with me. The subject had brain probes, and the scientist walked in eating an ice cream, and the subject's brain lit up as though he was eating the ice cream, but he wasn't. All over the computer, you would have thought the subject was eating the ice cream, but it's because we are so contagious that the brain perceives it as though it's happening. So I wish that I would have known this when I was a school site principal. I would have been really clear, much more, well, I'll tell you what, this is a 30-second, get myself ready to talk to somebody I'm irritated with, internal monologue, all right? And I'm thinking about a mom specifically that I wish I would have handled it differently. Here she comes, and she's been blowing it with her son. Here's my inner monologue. It's not what's wrong with her, it's what happened to her. If she had received parenting and modeling of how to be a good mama, she would show up differently for her son. The last thing she needs from me right now is judgment and shame. What she needs is a collaborator on her side so that she can get through this tough time. Whew. totally just shifted and changed my whole heart attitude about her, right? That took 30 seconds. I intentionally do that now because I know that I can show up to a meeting and be pissed at someone, but smile and say all the right things and have it go really bad because they feel me, even though I'm smiling and I'm saying all the right things. Does that make sense? It's really important that we as leaders get really clear and self-reflect about how we're feeling about people before we go into a space with them. All right, so we'll take a break and you can think about that and talk about it, and then we'll come back and we'll do some work. All right. When we were looking at that list of all these behaviors that are indicative of a child that has come from toxic stress and trauma, I want to pause to say, I know people in my life, and I'm sure you know people in your life, who haven't lived much of a day of trauma in their lives, yet they still present with those behaviors. And that links us back to our DNA. Here's an example. Xavier was 3. We were leaving my husband's office. We're at a stoplight. And he says, "Mommy, go, it's our turn." And I'm all, "Whoa, baby, no, the light is red." And boop, it turned green. What he had done in his little 3-year-old brain, because this is a part of his survival behavior, he was studying the lights and the pattern of the lights, and he knew when our light was going to turn green as a 3-year-old. When we would be invited to birthday parties, we would take him, like if it was at a park or it was at a public place, we always took him there the day before so that he could get used to the environment. Because if we didn't, the day of, he would be like hyper stressed, and he'd be looking around at his environment, and he had to see what was safe and what wasn't safe, and he had a hard time engaging socially because he needed to feel safe in his environment. So I just say that because our ancestors and their DNA and their experiences absolutely impact us in both beautiful and in challenging ways. In Shasta County, we started the American Indian Advisory. We have 4 local tribal entities, and we know that near genocide took place on our soil. We know that the reason that our Native youth are red on the data dashboard for chronic absenteeism, for suspension rates, for behavior, is because of the DNA that is threaded through them. Both the beautiful ceremony and the contributions that they bring, but we have, generation of, there's a place in Old Shasta you can drive through where they were paying, $10 a scalp for women's heads and $5 for men because the women are the life givers. And the government was paying to do that. So when you know that like your government was trying to kill off your people, it's pretty intense. So we are seeing huge gains, and we are building relationships between our Native tribal families and our schools, because schools were weaponized against our Native people. So, and I'm sure it's no different in this area. So it's just something to consider. I'm using that group as an example, just because for us it was such a big deal, and it still is, that we think about that DNA and why sometimes they show up the way that they do. All right. I have to take a deep breath after I talk about it because it's very, Taking deep breaths, by the way, is such a great way to clear a heavy emotion that you're having. You will hear me do it when I'm talking about things sometimes that are a bit painful. So I'm going to bring us back real quick to this. This limbic region of the brain is a big deal. We're about to watch a video about this. I love this example. I was at a conference, and this student panel from New York was brought in, and they talked about how they were having these issues with chronic absenteeism. And all the adults were sitting around in a room, and they were hypothesizing about, well, why aren't these students coming to school? And well, maybe it's this, and maybe it's that. And somebody said, why don't we have the students go ask the students, right? Brilliant. So the students went and did empathy interviews with other students. This is high school. And what they found out, what they consolidated all of the information down to, was a lack of sense of belonging, right? Like these kids that weren't there didn't feel like they fit in there, didn't feel like they were a part of the community, didn't feel like they had anything to contribute or that they really had a connection. So we know that one way to, address chronic absenteeism and behavior is to create a sense of community and a sense of belonging for students. If you have anybody in this district that's trained in restorative practices, that is like one of the #1 ways to get that into your programs is to do that. Okay, so we're gonna watch this video and then you are going to self-reflect.
You had so much to offer yesterday. You okay?
I'm tired.
So what's going on?
Strong relationships are central to the learning process. What the science of learning and development tells us is that we need to create learning environments which allow for strong long-term relationships for children to become attached to school and to the adults and other children in it.
When children have experiences of closeness and consistency and trust, oxytocin is released. Oxytocin has many, many positive effects on the development of the brain. So when we think about a relationship, we're not just talking about being nice to a child. We're talking about a child having an experience of attunement and trust strong enough to release the hormone oxytocin.
It starts from so much honesty and transparency with kids. It's really easy to strive to be this like idealized, always ready to go elementary school teacher, and that's not real and that's not human. When people start talking about other things while I'm still giving directions, it feels frustrating for me and I have to take a breath. My students connect most with me when they see that I also struggle and I also have challenges. It takes a lot of vulnerability on my part.
Get along with the best, so then sometimes I'm like, I can't do it, so I'm just not gonna do it. But when I like the teacher, I want to do their work. I'll be like, I can learn this.
So, I want you to just talk for a couple of minutes. What do you do to build connections with students? I know you do, but I just want you to share, cross-pollinate, be creative. What do you do to build connections? Outside of the box. We'll talk about it and then we'll come back. This, in case like someone's like, oh, I don't know about this sequence of engagement thing, it lines right up to Maslow. Take a look at that. And benefits of intentional wellness practices. This is what I want. This is what I want for all of you, right? When we get too deep into our work and we don't pull ourselves back out and do these well-being things for ourselves, illness finds its way into the cells of our bodies. It is scientifically proven. We have got to, I say, I stand guard at the portholes of my mind, because if I am in a position of shaming myself and I'm drilling down, I once actually gave myself strep throat. That might sound crazy if you're not like of this mindset, but our thoughts about ourselves and others are so powerful beyond belief. So we just want to stand guard at the portals of our mind when we think about how we think about ourselves and others. But Maslow's hierarchy links right up to the sequence of engagement. All these basic needs, this is that relational love, belonging, and then self-actualization and that higher order level thinking that we want everyone to do. So now, you each have a piece of paper on the table. You're each going to have one. You don't have to share it with anyone if you don't want. This is really just time for you. This is just an example of what my coworker filled out when she was doing hers. This is all for you. You can say you with adults, you with whoever, really just you. This is you. And really today, like, we're not going to spend time on this side. This is something you can kind of think about, like, what would the adults that I work with like for, you know, to regulate, to be relational. Today we just want to try to, and this box is, I mean, when I was first teaching 8th grade, I was teaching 8th grade science. And holy smoke, some of those concepts were really challenging for this brain. I would be up till like 10:30 rereading the concepts about the moon and about the scientific theories. That was tough content for me, so I had to make sure I was calm, I was relaxed, I was feeling safe before I could like lesson plan. So really, today, in the time that we have, I would love for you to write down a list of things that help you regulate. what is it that calms your soul? Is it a visualization? Is it walking? Is it a cold drink? Is it a special snack? And then what helps you, like a one-on-one conversation with a student, laughter, games, what helps you to feel relationally connected, right? So just jot down ideas for yourself, talk to a neighbor if you want, and we'll come back in 5 minutes and check in, and then we'll give more time if we need more time. Sound good? I know most of you probably already have things that you intuitively do. I just like to call it out so it's explicit, so that you have a plan, because it's not if, but when another human being is going to trigger us, whether it's an adult or a child or parent, whoever it might be, a coworker. And knowing about this is half the battle. The brain is a pattern seeker. And if you know that that's what is about to happen inside of you, if you're starting to feel that tension and your heart's starting to race, or your chest is starting to tighten, or your fists are starting to clench, you know that you are now becoming very contagious to everyone in the room, right? And that is not what we want to be doing to affect change. I spent an hour, and this is so sad, I spent an hour in a K-1 community day school classroom, and the teacher didn't smile once. So when I debriefed with her, I said, I know you love these babies, and I know you want them to be regulated. I said, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna, in all 4 walls in the classroom, we put smiley faces as a reminder for her. Like when you smile, you send a chemical message to your children that it's okay, you're calm, everything's good, we're safe, we're relationally good. But when you're like intense all the time, because children from trauma, they have like a spidey sense. They will study you, they will watch you, they will, man, it's like that in the video where she said, an elementary school teacher, when I'm authentic, I was coaching a teacher, because we do tapping, we do emotional freedom technique tapping, and we do trauma tapping technique. And TTT, just bird walk here, is a free app on your phone. If you just Google on your app store Peaceful Heart Network, it will bring up a little video. It's like a 4.5-minute video of a little avatar who like shows you about 12 times where you're tapping here and you're swiping here and here. And anyway, this teacher, 6th grade teacher I was coaching, had one of those moments where she had a student working on something for about 10 or 15 minutes, and she walked over and he hadn't done a single thing. And she did one of these. And everyone looked at her. She was like, Kelly, in the moment, I wanted to lie, and I almost did. And then I remembered what you said. And so she said, you know what, class? It's okay. I just had a flip lid moment. And she said, I looked around and they all started tapping. They were all doing this, because with emotional freedom technique tapping, this is one of the spots. She said they knew, because they'd been studying me, they'd been watching me, that tapping was one of the things that I did. And they've experienced me as being more calm and more fully present with them after I had done it. So they all started tapping with her. It was the most beautiful thing. And these things that we model for our students, they will use them then in real life crisis. A 4th grade teacher I was coaching, we had taught his whole class about hand breathing, right? Or he called it mountain breathing. And the idea is, and we'll do it in a few minutes, but his student was leaving school, one of his students, and his mom's car was hit by someone in oncoming traffic. And so somebody from the school office went out to check on him, and he was sitting on the curb. She's like, how are you doing, buddy? Is there anything I can do to help you? Like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm good. I'm just doing my breathing. It's helping me. And this is what his teacher had taught him in the classroom. And here he is sitting on the curb after an accident, and he's doing his mountain breathing to calm himself down, because he knows that's a tool that's going to work for him. So, yeah. It's critical that we model what is working for us, because then our students will use it. I just want to weave a story in, because stories teach, and I was just thinking about this. I was coaching a 2-3 combo teacher at a high poverty school a year ago. So like think November, it's kind of getting cold outside. And she had a really rough class, and there were 2 boys in particular who were super challenging. And I was in the room, so I'm establishing rapport with them and trust. And on this particular day I was there, and I'm watching them be super awful towards her. And it's one of those times where I'm like, and I don't want to get involved, but I'm like, oh, I want to get involved. So I just sat and watched. And then the intercom, someone comes over the intercom, says recess. I can tell like her hair's on fire. Oh, it's too cold to go outside for recess today. It's going to be indoor recess. And I walked over to her and I said, you gotta get these kids outside. I go, it's not raining. Just walk, walk out there and like have them. She's like, I'm out, I'm gone. I'm out. I kept these two boys. And I'm in the room alone with them now, and they start jumping off furniture and doing all these crazy things. And I go whoop down to my brainstem, like all of a sudden, and I can only talk about it now because I'm on the other side of it, but in the moment it freaked me out. I was like, oh dear God, what if they like break a piece of furniture while Kelly Rizzi's in the room alone with them, and like what's gonna happen? And I started to go to this fear place, and it was triggering for me because they were out of control. It started to make me feel out of control. And then I took a breath, and I was like, Kelly. Sequence of engagement, you know this. And one of the tabs that I had open in that room, and don't laugh, but there is a great Snoop Dogg video. It's not really Snoop Dogg, but it's like these dogs, cartoon dogs. Affirmations, my parents love me, and it's this rhythmic song. Some of you are shaking your heads. Just Google Snoop Dogg affirmations. K5, it is a crowd winner. It's rhythmic, it's heartbeat, it's positive, it's affirmations. So I took a deep breath and I said, hey guys, and I clicked on the video and I said, hey, let's just tap together. Can we just tap together? They're like, all right, and it's so contagious, this music, that we're all tapping, we're doing our tapping. And then after it's like the song is over, I pause, I go, hey, whew, I feel a lot better. Do you? Yeah. Then I could go to this place and be relationally safe with them. I'm like, hey, I was watching you today and you were so outside of your character. Like you were doing these things, but that's not truly like who you are. I know you to be this, 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 and this. And I told them all the good things that I've observed about them, and I reaffirmed and reminded them of their truth. And they're like, yeah. And after doing that, then they had access to this. And one of them said, well, our teacher thinks we're bad. And the other one said, yeah, so we're gonna be bad. And he starts to get upregulated again. I was like, whoa. The boy says, I had my mom come in and meet with her to tell her that I'm good, but I don't think she believed my mom. I was like, oh. So I was weaving restorative practices into the classroom because there was a lot of backbiting amongst students. There was no compassion or empathy. So we were doing like welcoming circles and closing circles and chats. So I facilitated a restorative chat between the teacher and the students, and they were completely misunderstanding each other, and we were able to remedy that. But for me, from like looking down on my silly self in that moment of like being scared of, but we do. When I'm around people that are out of control, it tends to make me feel out of control. On a scale of 1 to 10 for adverse childhood experiences, I'm like a 7 from my childhood experiences. So I understand my stress response system gets keyed up and triggered probably faster than others does. So I really have to do these things in order to stay fully present and not flip my lid, right? So let's do this. I'm going to invite you to stand up right now. And I'm going to teach you a really cool tool that was taught to me. You do need a little space, though. This is called the blowout. But then the guy that was next to me at the training, he morphed it into a 2x4. And you'll see why in a minute. We'll do it 3 times. The first time we will do the blowout. The second time we will do the 2x4. And the third time, I'll let you choose whichever one felt better to you. Sound good? So here's the blowout. The idea is you stand with your feet kind of shoulder width apart, and you're going to take a deep belly breath in. And you're going to hold it as long as it's comfortable, and then you're going to blow it out. And then stretch, just dangle. Dangle, feel that nice stretch. And then you're going to slowly stand back up. Allow your breath to just normalize. That's a great stress reduction, by the way, like at a staff meeting after you've been like state testing or doing something intense, like just let your staff just blow it out. And if you're comfortable, that vocalization adds to the physiological experience. Okay, now we're going to do the 2x4. This is what the guy next to me did. We came up like this, and instead of just blowing it out, he did this. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? But to him, like that deep muscle proprioceptive, like, was like what he needed. He was having a stressful day, apparently. But I took it, and now I use it with students, and they love that, breaking that 2x4 over their legs. So let's try that one now. Don't hurt yourself on a table or anything. Here we go.
Can we envision something on a 2x4?
Absolutely. You do you. Here we go. And just notice how that feels. Yeah, or maybe a kick would be better for you. When you come down, maybe kick. Yeah, whatever it is. All right, now we're going to do it a third time, and you pick whichever one works best for you. Here we go. And we slowly stand back up. And just stretch anything that wants to be stretched. Maybe it's your back, maybe it's your leg. Oh, we don't normally sit this long. And then I watched a third grade teacher do this the other day. I thought it was brilliant. She did something kind of upregulating like that with her class. And then she said, okay, class, let's spider our fingers. I call these finger push-ups. And she said, okay, let's go all the way to 100. And they counted by 5. So let's just do that. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 100. Deep breath. And then we'll have a seat. Incidentally, this is a great one. When we think about our tactile system, our fingertips love input, right? And so she, I had taught her finger push-ups. She turned it into spidering, and then she had them counting. I was like, you are brilliant. Can I have people come shadow you and observe you? And she wove academics into it. And this also is the heartbeat. So you've got the heartbeat, you've got proprioception, you've got this tactile thing happening. You're also vocalizing, so you're vibrating your vagus nerve. All of these things are regulating to the stress response system, just all in like a minute. The payoff is huge for doing something like that. All right. So now you all have a plan. So this is like a 9-minute, see, I had you do something physical so you could tolerate 9 minutes of a video. Dr. Perry co-authored a book with Oprah Winfrey. It's called What Happened to You, because of course the idea is it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. I just finished Dr. Gabor Mate's book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it's all about addiction. And oh my goodness, does it explain our homeless population and our addiction and all the mamas whose babies are testing pos-tox at birth, because even though they're pregnant, their brain is incapable of making the best decision for that baby, and they still continue to use in order to be okay in their skin. So, but they wrote the book, What Happened to You? And this is a conversation. The book, thumbs up if you've read the book or you're familiar with it. Some of you maybe. It's a conversation between the two of them, so they go back and forth. So this is a conversation between the two of them, where she's going to talk about this 3-layer cake, which is what we just did with the sequence of engagement, and he kind of talks about the science of that, so you can hear it from him. I never get tired of listening to him.
You have more tools. The older you get, the more tools you have to understand and make sense out of what's happening to you. But an infant doesn't have their brain is not developed yet to the point where they can really understand what is happening. And furthermore, these key regulatory systems, these key stress response systems that we write about, they're organizing very rapidly early in life. Like you said, it's a sponge-like sort of responsivity to what they're experiencing. And so if those stress response systems experience chaos, threat, and all kinds of extreme things, there'll literally be these genetic changes in the way those systems organize, and they'll literally view the world as a threatening place. And that initial signal from the world that you're going to live in a threatening place So you need to be prepared for danger. So you need to activate your stress response and walk around in a state of fear all the time. And so what that means is, if even in a safe environment, if your brain is primed to respond to everything as if it's a threat, a teacher who comes up to you and tries to be kind, your brain will go, what do you want from me? As opposed to, let me listen to you. And that leads to this cascade of problems that just magnifies as you get older. And the key thing, and we write about this in the book, the key thing is that the older the child gets, and the more they struggle with these things, the more the adult world misunderstands their behavior. So instead of saying your inattention and your aggressive behavior is because of what happened to you, it's because you have some other problem, and so we're going to punish you and exclude you. And it literally leads to this sort of vicious negative cycle of misunderstanding and then actions on the part of the adult world that further traumatize the child.
So you explain to us this. You want us to imagine the brain as a 4-layer cake, because you say the key question is not only is what happened to you. The key question is, if you want to understand someone, it's the key question to, if you want to understand also the brain. So to explain this, you want us to imagine the brain as a 4-layer cake.
Right, and again, I think one of the reasons I wanted to write this book was that I believe that the more science literate our population becomes, not just about what we're talking about, but about a lot of other things. But I think that the more our everybody understands a little bit about how the brain works and how the brain changes, the better off we're going to be. We'll be better parents, we'll be better teachers, we'll be better in law enforcement. And one of the simple fundamental tools we do to help teach people these things is have them envision the brain as this upside down triangle. And down at the bottom are these sort of regulatory systems that control heart rate, blood pressure, and so forth. And as you get higher and higher in the brain, you get to the cortex, the top part of your brain, that's the most uniquely human part of our brain. So if you look at all of the capabilities that we have as a species, the most uniquely human capabilities arise from systems in our cortex. And so
That's at the top of the brain.
language,
That's the top of the brain.
at the top of the brain. And those capabilities are the things that we're trying to basically encourage and build into the brain of a child when we teach them right from wrong, when we teach them language, when we teach them geography, when we teach them the story of our people. All of those things go into the cortex. But the dilemma is, down here in the lower part of the brain, we've got these regulatory networks involved in the stress response. And when they're activated, and when you feel under threat, the first thing that happens is you shut down the top part of your brain. And so if you want to teach a child who has trauma-related dysregulation, you're going to have to figure out how to regulate them before you talk to them about geography. You're going to have to figure out how to regulate them before you talk to them about math. All of the things we're trying to do in education, parenting, therapy, that are intended to reach the top part of the brain, they're never going to get there if we don't first deal with the trauma-altered stress response systems that originate in the lower part of the brain.
Okay, so it's why you also say you can never, in an argument, if you're in an argument with someone, and this goes for whether you're arguing with a child, or child is really angry and upset, if someone is angry, you can never reach them through more anger. And that's just not philosophical or social, that's actually the way your brain works.
Biology.
It's biology.
Our brains are exquisitely attuned to the relational cues that other people are giving. We're contagious to the emotions of other people.
So if you're in an argument,
if
you're in an argument with your spouse, interrupting here, if you're in an argument with your spouse, for example, and they're escalating and you're escalating, and you're trying to reason with them, there's no reason that can actually be received because the brain won't let it. So you're saying
Exactly.
You can't coach, you can't reason, you can't teach, you can't get somebody to agree with you when they're in the midst of their anger, period.
Exactly.
it does not
Exactly.
work.
Exactly. And the reason that is, and this is something that is just simple biology, and everybody can learn this. And once people do learn this, it really opens up a lot of doors for the way you understand the people around you
Yeah.
and yourself. And so the key to this is that when I talk with you, Oprah, and when the people who are listening to us, when they hear us, that information goes into the lower part of their brain first.
Yeah.
It doesn't go directly to their cortex. It has to get through this lower kind of reactive part of our brain, and then it has to go through the emotional part of our brain, and then it finally gets up to the reasoning part of our brain. So there's a lot of places where you can get short-circuited. And so that's why we use this term. We talk about, the sequence of engagement. If you really want to get to somebody's cortex, first of all, they have to be regulated. And then you have to connect with them as a person, that use those relational sort of superhighways.
You keep using
to
the
get up
term
to the
regulated.
cortex.
You keep using the term regulated, and I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that term. I know in your world, you all regulate all the time, and now I teach this at my school, so I knew that it was getting through when I went back to school in 2019, which is the last time I've seen all the girls, and they're all talking to me about their regulation practices. So, and they're saying, so one girl actually said to me, "Mama, what do I do when someone is clicking their pen to regulate themselves, but it's dysregulating me?" So they're all into being regulated. So explain what that means. What does being regulated mean?
Well, broadly speaking, it means being in balance.
It means being in balance. Yeah.
Being in balance. And we have, your body has all these systems that, your lungs, they help you sort of manage and keep in balance your oxygen levels. And so if your oxygen level gets low because you're working really hard by walking up steps, you'll take deeper breaths. And so you get a little dysregulated by getting short of breath, and your body will work to regulate you, get you back in balance. And so we have all of the systems that we have. The systems that have to do with sleep and wake, the systems we have to do with, oxygen and sugar in our blood, for example, they're always trying to keep us in balance. And so these stress response systems that I kind of talked about that are in the lower part of the brain, they're continually getting information from the outside world and from the inside world. And one of the major sets of signals that your brain cues into is the relational milieu, which I basically mean the signals coming from the people around you. And so if you're getting signals from the people in your classroom, for example, that you belong, you feel safe, you feel regulated. But going back to these microaggressions that I talked about earlier, if you're getting signals that you don't quite belong, you're not one of us, you literally feel dysregulated. And it's a stressor. And so anything that makes you feel marginalized, minimized, degraded, not heard, it activates your stress response.
Just talk to somebody about what that meant to you. Another great book, Elena Aguilar, she does a lot of coaching. In her very first book, it's like in the first, maybe it's in the introduction, she talks about the stimulus and the response, and how, like if you're regulated, if you're in balance, when the stimulus comes at you, maybe it's a rude student, maybe it's an upset parent, that's the stimulus. If we know, here's that stimulus, if we know that we have the ability to pause, just press pause and take a breath, then we're able to respond as opposed to reacting, right? And if I'm regulated when that stimulus comes at me, I'm gonna be way better at responding as opposed to reacting, which is not gonna be my best self. So to help adults learn that, hey, guess what? We all have permission to press pause when someone's upsetting us, right? I don't have to respond immediately to that question or to that complaint. I have permission to just take a breath. to get access to my cortex so that I don't say something I'm going to regret later, right? Great point, thank you. Something that I share with teachers is like that whole idea of fear. And I heard this from a brilliant workshop that I attended last summer. Imagine a swimming pool, right? And when you're dealing with a really tough student with a really difficult behavior, I want you to pretend as though they have fallen into the deep end of a swimming pool and they have forgotten how to swim. And they are terrified, right? Like the last thing they need us to do is to take the net and like poke them, which sometimes we do with our sarcasm or our shaming, things that we say when they're super out of control. They're really in a place of fear. What they need most from us is to be a collaborator on their side and help pull them out of the deep end. Right? So thank you for that, because teachers feel fearful, and a lot of times the behavior that we're witnessing from the student is because they are in a place of fear and terror. Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, look at that, humming. Okay, how about, what's another song we all know? Okay, just for sake of time, we'll just do Happy Birthday, okay? Because I think we all know that. Ready? Here, we're 1, 2, 3. Deep breath. All right, this is going to be a little snippet on co-regulation, and then we're going to move into our next big piece. This is obvious, yes? And this comes actually from Heather Forbes from the book Help for Billy, another great book. Thank goodness there are so many great books. This is just a quick window into, and part of me sharing this with you is so that you can take this and share this with your staff or adults that you work with that work with youth. We all have windows of stress tolerance. And if you're a child that comes from a home where there's a persistent toxic stress, your window of stress tolerance is like this. It's really itty bitty. So it will take the slightest little thing and you will flip your lid and you will potentially have an outburst. Again, it's not that child's fault and it's not the teacher's fault. We have no idea what might trigger that student. But for other students that come from homes that are more regulated and more nurturing and more respectful and where they experience dignity and all of these things, they will be able to tolerate more stress. During COVID, my greatest concern was for kids like this that were stuck in their homes with other adults that have stress responses that tiny as well. So I have to take deep breaths when I think about that. We go into schools and we teach students about this and we teach them how to calm themselves down so that when they do go home, they can do things to help. Because when cortisol and adrenaline is flooding through your system, your brain absolutely wires up in a different way. It wires up in a very disorganized way. That's why with a functional map, we're able to see where the disorganization is, and then we're able to come in. It's just like like if I'm gonna do I've got a student 2 years below in reading, I'm gonna do all the multiple measures, and I'm gonna figure out where the holes are, and then I'm gonna fill those gaps. Same kind of concept. So, I remember the first year I was teaching 8th grade, and I had a young lady who was being rude to me in front of the class, so I really nailed her. How'd that go? Kind of like that. She called me the B word and left the room. Awesome. Totally fractured the relationship I was trying to build. So this is called the arousal continuum, and this is what it looks like a lot of times when adults don't understand the science that we've been talking about all morning. Whew. Somebody challenges me, I go right up there with them, and now it's anger met with anger never works. Just like Oprah said, if you and your spouse are arguing, forget about it. You can't logic with crazy, that's what I often say. This is what it looks like when you understand the science and when you feel that emotion coming on for yourself and you take a breath and you let yourself pause before you react. You quite literally have the ability to take an upregulated student and bring them back down through all kinds of different methods. Sometimes I will just ask, if they're okay with it, I will have them sit. I will just sit near a student and I will slow and down-regulate my own breath because I know how contagious I am. Within 5 minutes, oftentimes I can get a student's breath to match mine in terms of the slower pace so that they can then have access to their thinking brain before we ever try to process. Or I will walk with them. Parallel placement is a concept that's coming up. I will walk with them parallel and won't mention anything about it until I can tell that they are, in their cortex again. So I'm going to share a short 2-minute video to kind of enunciate a point.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
All right, so I share a video that evokes laughter, but I really show it because I was guilty of this as a classroom teacher. I had a student named Nick, and he came from a lot of trauma, and he was disrespectful. He would distract the class, and one day, I remember distinctly, I took roll and he was absent, and I did one of these. I did a little happy dance. I didn't say anything, but because we're so contagious, my whole class of students picked up on the fact that I was in a better mood because Nick wasn't there. It was going to be an easier day to teach because Nick wasn't there. So Nick comes back, and guess what Nick picks up on from all of the other students? I'm giving all the other students grapes, and he's getting cucumbers. Like, goosebump moment for me. I realized that I was doing this right before Christmas, and I course corrected. And, it even tears me up now, thinking about how I didn't even realize what I was doing, but when I was so frustrated with him, the other students felt that, and then they started to be frustrated with him. So here, I'm the adult in the room. I'm the one who should be a collaborator on his side, supporting him, and I was causing the harm. I was causing the rest of his class to see him differently, view him differently, treat him differently. And effectively what I created was a classroom where there wasn't a sense of belonging, there wasn't equity, it wasn't a good learning environment. I reached out and started doing things to connect with him, and by January I had been able to turn it around, but it took me a few weeks to earn his trust back. And for me to every day say in my head, what do I love about Nick? What do I love about Nick? And I would have a list, these are the things that I love about him. And he's kind, and he's thoughtful, and he's creative, and I would affirm him. I had to convince myself to fall in love with Nick so the rest of the class could follow in suit. Does that make sense? It's a cautionary tale to be like, okay, what can we do when we're dealing with a difficult student to bring everyone on board and inform them so that we can do things that make the most sense for that child? And so we're giving all of them emotional grapes. I was about to say I spent some time with an alt ed school, and all the staff members were there, and the secretary said, okay, you guys, so every week I'm going to send an email. There won't be anything in the email. It'll just be a subject line, and it'll say, are you giving all of them grapes? Like, are we being mindful to give all of our students grapes and authentic, fully present attention, right? So, all right. I'm going to take us to our next step. So parallel placement is a really cool concept. I didn't realize, well, I mean, I did when I was doing it, but when Xavier was little, we would put him in the car. I would drive, because I knew that then he'd fall asleep. Anybody do that, have that experience, right? There's a reason for that. The whirring of the car motor actually mimics the in utero heartbeat, and it lulls the baby to sleep. Well, another thing that happens if you guys are in Ukiah, so where would be the nearest spot where you would drive to go to a conference with a coworker? Santa Rosa. So have you ever noticed if you're in a car with a coworker and you're driving to Santa Rosa, how much more you share about your personal life? How much more you share about like you would never do if you were just sitting here in the room. When you're traveling at the same pace at the same time, there's a chemical thing that happens in the human brain that relaxes you, that helps you feel safe, that helps you feel more regulated. I've been to 3 different cities in California where somebody shared that they work in group homes, and they bought a van large enough for all the residents to fit in, and when they drive and they take drives together, that's when they talk about what's really going on and what the issues really are, because they've got these 2 things happening. So in Shasta County, if you ever came to visit, you would see administrators, counselors, therapists walking parallel with students around the perimeter of the campus. If we have somebody who is eloping, we walk around the inside of the cafeteria if it's raining, and we walk parallel. When we're walking together, it's leveling that playing field, it's calming the brain to the point where the child can then process with us about what just happened. But walking is very rhythmic and regulatory. It's also really good input in terms of proprioceptive input for your joints, for your legs, for your muscles, for your arms. All of those systems are working, and so there are just layers of reasons why it's so good to do that. Another thing that we do is this. If I'm in a classroom and I can see a student is about to flip their lid or they are becoming upregulated, I would never, if it was you, I would never go eyeball to eyeball with you. The brain perceives that as a threat, and he's going to go further down into his brainstem. Instead, what I will do is I will walk around like this. I'll get down at his level. I won't make eye contact. I will be at his level, and I will say, hey, buddy, is there anything I can do to help? I can see you're a little distracted right now. I'll check back with you in a couple minutes, and then I leave. I don't hover and wait for compliance, and I never say, stop doing that thing that you're doing. I always pose a question. Hey, what's going on? Help me understand what's going on. And I wait for a response, as opposed to being punitive, because we know that a child who already has a short window of stress tolerance. If I walk over and if I force, and I'm trying to get them to comply, it's never going to go well. We're going to see that graph of co-dysregulation. We're not going to have co-regulation. All in my approach, right? So parallel is something that has changed my life, even with family members. My sister handles high dollar properties, and one of the owners was being super aggressive over email. She's all, Kelly, when we went into the meeting, I sat down right next to him. He treated me very differently. So another little tool when we talk about co-regulation. These 3 ways to regulate our stress are, the brain remembers things best in 3s. So these are the 3 that we typically teach. So let's do this, where you're sitting. I can borrow this chair. Whew. This is a clapping sequence. It doesn't take much time, but we'll go clap, clap, lap, lap, stomp, stomp, clap. And we'll do it 5 times, okay? Here we go. 1. You guys are good. One more time. So we do that, and I will do that in a classroom when I need to bring them back. I won't use a chime. I will just do that. And then the students start doing it with me. I just wove rhythm. I just helped refocus everyone. We did it all together. I didn't have to use my voice. And we wove heartbeat in, which is very regulating. So that's just one example that I wanted you to experience. And then I have the students create their own little sequence. They'll go out to recess, or I'll give them time in class to create their own, and then we use theirs for a couple of weeks, and they love it. Breathing, of course, there are hundreds of ways to do breathing. We talked about hand breathing or mountain breathing. One that I learned on a call this week at a state level call was you take a deep breath where you feel like in through your nose, you feel like you fill up your lungs, so it looks like this. And then you take a couple more sips. And then exhale through your mouth. And you extend the exhale. There are different names for it, but I call it sip breathing because I take a couple more sips of breath. So let's just try that. Let's try a couple, see how it feels in your body. And I also tell people, never, ever, ever let anyone tell you to hold your breath to match their breath that they're holding. It can be very triggering in terms of a trauma response because some people have had fear around having to hold their breath. So it's just whatever your body's comfortable with. We'll just try some sip breathing. All right, here we go. It's my favorite way to breathe now. This summer we were at the lake and I got the hiccups and a friend of mine said, oh, just swallow it. I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you swallow a hiccup? Have you done this? Oh my God, my whole life. I've done my whole life and no one ever taught me. I was always sticking a pencil in my mouth and trying to drink some water. What do you know about like swallowing your hiccup? Do you mind sharing?
It's actually it's something we just did. You just do that and then you breathe and hold it, and then a couple times.
Yeah, brilliant. So now you all know how to get rid of hiccups. You literally like take a deep breath and then, but what she taught me was instead of blowing it out, swallow it. She said, swallow your breath, swallow that hiccup. I was like, okay, I'm gonna swallow that hiccup. It's so funny. So breathing, and then cross-lateral, we teach students, and you guys probably know this, that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa. So if you've heard of school moves or brain gems, anything you do cross-lateral is super helpful in connecting the brain and making whatever you're about to do that much easier. So, you might be familiar with like a cross crawl. I might have students do this. I was coaching a third grade teacher and she said, Kelly, I want to incorporate this into my PE class. I want you to come up and observe the first time I introduce the concept. So she's teaching her third graders the cross crawl. And what I see like 20% of her students doing is this. And they don't even know that they're not crossing the midline because their body spatial awareness their vestibular canal is so underdeveloped. And so we observed that. So then we just included more opportunities throughout the day. Okay, everybody, let's practice this. Let's stand up and try this cross-lateral movement. We're gonna make it easy, low cognitive content. We're just gonna count again by fives. We'll just go up to 50, but we're gonna do it across our body. So it's gonna look like this. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Simple, right? It feels great to be doing that. You just did rhythm, you're doing math, you're going cross-lateral, and then take it to the next level. If you find a partner, now we're gonna do it together, so we're gonna go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Boom, right? Really powerful time to and it's fun. Thank you. Kind of picked on you. I love it. Hand games. I always have this tab open I know that was fun, right? When students, like, anything you can do to do cross-lateral is beautiful. I taught the butterfly one day at a pretty rural school in our area. And this is another one that's great for cross-lateral. I weave all three in because then you've got like your heartbeat, the butterfly wings. Some people do this. I like to do this, and you do your breathing. She sat in the back of the room for like 30 minutes. I was like doing this because she was really stressed out. So these are regulation breaks. They come from this book, and they're organized by calming breaks, focusing breaks, and energizing breaks. And we're always adding to it. So if you use the link in the slide deck, you can share it with educators. It's just a nice way to have it up and ready. A K-8 school that we're working with, one of the 6th grade teachers just printed all of them, 4 per page, cut them out, laminated them, and she has them on a ring. So she has it right with her, so she doesn't have to think about it. It's just right there with her. And I already talked about the invisible intimacy barrier. This is a concept from Dr. Perry. And this is a child who comes from a warm, nurturing home. They show up at school. Hi, I'm Kelly. Do you love me? Because everyone at home loves me. Hi, I'm Kelly. Do you love me? Because everyone at home loves me. And I'm this bubbly, happy, like, oh, why would anyone be rude to me as an adult? Adults are kind and nurturing for me. But if you're a student who comes from a home like this, you show up at school with a completely different template. And those are the kids that tend to slip through the cracks because they're quiet. They're aching inside for connection with you, but you would never know it because their template says adults are going to hurt me. Of the tools that we've talked about, we're going to get to a point where you're going to have time to process and like drill down and talk with your coworkers about how you might want to share this out, how you might want to apply this. But this, honestly, what we're about to talk about, my hope is that after you experience this, you will go into classrooms with a completely different set of lenses through which you see students. Yeah, okay. Once we talk about it a bit, I'm going to give you some examples. So, and again, this is all trust-based relational interventions. This is where the science comes from. We're very familiar with these 5 senses, right? But unless we're talking, occupational therapy, we don't typically talk about proprioception or vestibular or interoception. Dr. Perry was talking about interoception in that video where he was like, you have an internal input and then you also perceive things from the external. He talks about how a Vietnam vet is walking down the streets of his town and a car backfires and he hits the deck because he assumes it's a bullet, right? Because information comes in from that lower region of the brain. It doesn't go into the smart part of the brain. It has to be processed. You think about teaching a lesson in a classroom and you think all the students learned it, right? Because you taught the lesson. But he said something about like, there are all of these spaces for that lesson to get hijacked on its way up to the cortex. So it's really perceived differently by every student unless we're really mindful about being biologically respectful and helping them all be regulated and feeling relationally safe before we start to teach that core content. So what we're going to talk about today is that heavy work, that deep muscle work, that vestibular, that sense of balance. A friend of mine adopted her daughter from China when she was 5, and she lived in an orphanage. And she'd go to the gymnastics studio, and she'd try to walk on a balance beam, and she'd fall off after one step. She had a very underdeveloped vestibular system. Another friend of mine, her son Atticus never crawled. He would just roll. He'd want to get over there, he would just roll. and then he just popped up and started walking. So he has a very underdeveloped vestibular system. He likes to watch TV upside down like this, with his head upside down. So there are little like key markers that you'll start to pick up on now in classrooms or with your own family members after understanding the science. So another video, it's quick, I promise. It is again to prove a point or to help you be more aware.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So it's actually an ad about bicyclists on the streets, but I like to use it because if you're a person who has lots of sensory integration issues and you're focusing on the fact that your sock is out of place in your shoe, you will miss the whole lesson that's happening in front of you because you're so fixated and you're perseverating over that sensory thing that's happening that's super frustrating for you. So just to kind of call it to attention that some of our students really would behave beautifully if we were aware of their sensory needs that are not being met. I was asked to go work with our transportation department. So let's see, let's get back to, there we go. So after the second session with them, one of the bus drivers started crying halfway through. And she said, there's this kid that I pick up at this school and he ruins my day every day. And I'm thinking maybe I just shouldn't be a bus driver anymore. And I looked at her and I said, well, you know what? I would love to do a ride along with you. Can I see the student? Can I just observe his behavior? So I did the next day. It was a very painful 2.5-hour drive. Woo, on a Friday afternoon. I had just had an appendectomy, so I still had I was like, ooh, maybe that wasn't the best idea to do it right then. But I did, and I got to see what the boy was doing, and his sensory needs weren't being met. We put a tote on her bus that all the students then could choose from when they got on the bus. The items that he would select completely regulated him, and his behaviors went away. How would you like being on a bus? It was 2 hours on the bus for this little guy. And he already has a lot of brain disorganization, and now put him on a bus for 2 hours and think he's not going to have, undesirable behaviors. So, just a quick 30 second, just turn to your neighbor. Have you had that experience? All right, well, we'll come back. So we're gonna come back. And I want you to first think about your own sensory profile. How does this apply to you? Would you check any of those boxes as being sensory seeking? My son checks off every one of those boxes, right? This is hysterical. On Monday, a coworker came over to my office space. She was like, Kelly, because I was asked to share out at our leadership team meeting that morning. And I was talking about this as being one of the most powerful things we're seeing shift behaviors in schools. She's like, Kelly, so she lives in Weaverville. She's all, so I was at a bar this weekend, and she's kind of rough and tumble. She's like, I was at a bar this weekend, and this guy, he owns a trucking, company, and we were talking, and we'd had a couple drinks, and he was like, yeah, I've lost friends, because, I'm the kind of guy, I love a bear hug. I love to get in there, I like to, and she looks at him, she's like, so, there's a science behind this? She's like, there are tools that can help you, She's like, you're sensory seeking. There are things you can do. He's like, oh, it was hysterical. She's like, I'm just some chick at a bar. So funny. But she was explaining to him what he could do if these are the types of behaviors. So for us, in terms of students, here are some things that we can do to help support sensory seeking students. I'll let you take a look at that list. I, until studying this, had no idea that the input and the feedback that your joints and your ligaments receive from simply jumping is tremendously powerful. I wish that I would have known this 2 years ago before I gave away the tiny little trampoline that we had for Xavier with the handle on it. Oh man, is that a powerful thing to have students do, and adults, to help regulate and to give that input into your physical body. You talking about jumping on trampolines? Oh no! Boing! So I was asked to come observe in a 4-5 combination class a couple weeks ago at one of our charter schools. we were doing like a 4-part series with their school, and one of the teachers said, hey, you got to see this boy. So what I observe is she had one of those, like, it's a squishy ball, but it looks like the earth. So I see this boy who I'm there to observe. He picks it up off her desk because he knows he can. And while she's talking to other students, he is doing this up against the wall. This ball, and I'm like, talking about risk management, and I'm sitting again like, and he's tossing it and like really like tossing it. And so he's getting, like, it's very satisfying for him, this thing that he's doing, and he's throwing it really hard and he's catching it. So what does he have? He's got proprioceptive. He's engaging that deep muscle, right? He's doing that, and it's the heartbeat. And it's like this. And he's totally regulating himself. But I'm freaked out because I'm afraid the ball's going to hit somebody in the room because he's hitting it pretty hard against the base of the wall. So I talked to her afterwards, and I was observing some other of his behaviors. I said, why don't we, if you're okay, I'd like to come in and do a little mini lesson with your class on things they can do without needing to have a ball in his hand, but still have that same kind of input. So I'm going to ask you to do these with me so you'll remember them. Remember how I said earlier, if you do these activities with me today, you'll remember them in a different way. So finger tracing, and these are just like some. We could come up with an even longer list. If you take your thumb and you just, I love hearts. I have since I was a little girl. I just trace a heart on my thumb. That is one thing. You can do it with any finger, but just finger tracing of any kind. You're getting that input into the fingertips. Finger push-ups on the midline, or call them your spider fingers, this. Again, great input to your fingertips. Kids can do this, do academics like the 3rd grade teacher I observed. Finger tapping is this. This is one that, like, when I have my son write an apology note to his teacher for blurting out, I say to him, tell her what you're gonna do next time you're really tempted to blurt out. He's like, Mrs. Zeno, the next time I feel like I'm gonna blurt, I'm gonna practice tapping my fingers to help calm myself down. And then folding your hands. It's so funny because we were asked to go do a workshop at a Catholic school. So funny. I'm like, you guys, you know this one? Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door, where's all the people? Did you ever do that when you were little? They were cracking up. So this one is actually, there are no people. This is just folding them like this. And like what I tell students is nobody knows you're doing this, but just try tracing the inside of the palm of your hand like this. You can do it down here in your seat. Nobody knows. Switch off, do one, and then do the other. It's another like nice cross-lateral thing that they can do, and they can put pressure in on it. This one is one of my favorites. I do this all the time. Brr, brr, brr. Like if you're tapping your fingers like this on a surface. I do it on my leg. I do it on any surface that I can. It's very satisfying for me to feel that input. It's rhythmic, it's repetitive, it's predictable. And then, like, let me find a chair. One of our alt-ed schools, I was on one of our alt-ed sites. What's that? Oh, no, this is actually good. I'm actually not gonna lift my body off the chair. What I'm doing is, I'm engaging all these muscles, and I'm just doing this, and I'm breathing. Try that where you're sitting, see if you can do that. You might not be able to, but if you can, it's just a very simple, take a deep breath. In the case of this little guy that I was working with, chair pull downs, it's hard because I've got these handles here, but I said, because he really was like, he was gonna go across the room and hit another child, and he was so frustrated with him. So I took him outside and said, hey buddy, I want you to do this when we go back in. I want you to like pull down, like you're forcing your core into the chair and like pull up. So we went back in and he was doing that, and he's taking some deep breaths. And he looks over at me, he says this, it's working. Like, yes. Like silently, he was, that deep proprioceptive, deep muscle work he needed. He wanted to go punch the kid, but he was doing this instead, and he was letting me know it was working. He wasn't getting in trouble. Dots and squeezes comes from School Moves, and school is S''COOL. It's a great program, all about cross-lateral, but it's like your joints. You're squeezing dots on the palm of your hand, and you're making sure to get the joints like this, and then the squeeze as you move up your arm. And then we switch to the other hand, and we do it, right? Press against your palms, isometrics. We call this the Jedi because we all look like Jedi Knights. And then you pull. And we take breaths while we're doing that. So these are some things that we can do in a moment's time, whole class. Or I give a lot of these to my students who have ADHD and who are really struggling to pay attention in class and they're not learning because they're so distracted. I give them things like this, and these are just some that I put on a slide. You guys, we could create an even longer list of things that kids could do. So I just wanted to give those as examples. And then here we go into sensory avoidant. So see if that is more resonating with who you are. I'm definitely much more this. I will leave a store if somebody has offensive perfume on. Like, I cannot tolerate it. A lot of these kids on that bus that I was, and by the way, that bus ride along that I did, we drive all of the IEP students in Shasta County. Shasta County Office of Ed does. So these are all students who already have a lot of sensory integration issues. A lot of the kids would just fall asleep on the bus because they were like so overstimulated. So here are some things we can do. Some of these are obvious, but this little guy that I was observing, at one point I was watching him do this, and I said, hey, would you like some noise-canceling headphones? Yes, please. So I grabbed them from the bus driver and gave them to him. What we ended up doing with some of our Cal Hope funding is we actually created these we call them ready-to-go totes, and we put them on every bus that transports IEP students with a little informational video, so that when the kids get on the bus, they get to pick a sensory item, and they go sit down and they have it, and then they put it back. Actually, we put it in another container, and we gave the bus drivers wipes to clean, sanitize them with at the end of the ride. But behaviors have gone way down on our buses because we're giving them things to meet their needs. This is a nice little movement break. This you can do sitting down, or you can do standing up. Would you like to stay seated, or would you like to stand up to do it? Stand up? Okay. This is a great one. I know a 3rd grade teacher, I know a 6th grade teacher, I know an 8th grade teacher. When they come in from lunch recess, they do this, and the kids count on it. You're gonna use your right hand, your left hand, your right foot, and your left foot. We're just gonna count down from 5. When I learned this, he counted down from 7. It doesn't matter the number, but when we have gotten all the way down to 1, we're gonna clap to signify that we have counted. Then we're going to take a deep breath before we sit back down. And then when we sit back down, we're going to do this. So when we do this, I'm going to ask you intentionally to vocalize so you have that vibratory experience. And I'm going to ask you to smile while we're doing it to see if you experience it differently, okay? And you might be saying, well, I don't feel like smiling, Kelly. I know you might not, but when you fake it till you make it, these amazing neurochemicals flood through your body when you just put a smile on your face. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. Deep breath. And then have a seat. When you have a seat, you can spider your fingers. Last week I had a teacher tell me, yeah, but Kelly, when I do that, then they're all wild. And what we talk about when we're, so I heard somebody say you meet them where they're at. If I have a class and they're super like, rah, after coming in from recess, that's typically how it goes. I will start with a big, like, motion and activity with them. If I'm with a group and they are kind of quiet and kind of they're falling asleep, I will start with a slower, more quiet movement. We will start like this, and then we will move into something that is more, a bigger, larger kind of an activity. We always meet them where they're at. And we actually have, I got winded there. For our Tier 2 behavior students at our schools, we have a separate room where we do sensory work, and we have a sensory diet for those students, and they go 4 days a week, at least 15 minutes a day at the beginning of the day. And it's rough for some teachers because, core content at that time of the day. There is such a tremendous payoff in that student's ability to focus, moving through their day, that you cannot even believe the difference. Like, we have an administrator, I don't know if you're familiar with Bernie Fall River, but she's the school site principal at Bernie. We did functional maps for 14 of her like high flyers who were like physically, and these are K3 students, like throwing furniture kind of high flyers. That was January of last year. By May, when she came back and shared out her results and her functional maps, like the level of organization that had happened, because she took those students 4 days a week to a sensory space and allowed them to receive that input that their bodies were craving, and their behaviors went away. At that point, she said she only had 4 that she was looking at potential alternative placement for, because they learned what their bodies needed, and then they went back into the classrooms, and their classroom teacher supported them in that, and they were doing it whole class. So now I want to talk to you about, we're going to go through some of these, but we're going to get to 3 that are like the big, you just won the lottery. Like, you want to do these things. This is kind of just awareness that we give to educators. When you think about a child who's orally stimulated, we have jewelry that we will put on the end of a pencil and they can chew on it. When I was a school site principal and we were doing state testing, I always bought a bunch of mint gum, and all the students that were state testing got to chew mint gum. Before they left the room, the teacher would hold the trash can and they'd have to spit it out as they left. But chewing is rhythmic, it's the heartbeat, and mint is very alerting, and it keeps you like awake and focused. I know it's getting warm in here, thank you. So you can kind of take a look at this list. Frozen grapes are great. I had a student, oh, by the way, when we were doing that mini lesson in the 4-5 combo class, I learned so much from students. One of the students said, instead of doing this, I flick my fingers because it feels better. Like, because she wants more input on her fingertips, so she flicks her fingers instead of just tapping them. Tapping them is not satisfying enough for her. She also told me, she said, I like to chew carrots. I don't really like the taste, but I love the crunch. And it is all about that input that your joints and that your ligaments are receiving when that input happens. So there's a whole science behind it. Crunchy foods, crushed ice. Your dentist would not ask you to chew ice, but it is one that apparently helps. And then we have, things that we smell. Of course, this is, I was in a classroom yesterday morning. I walked in and it was beautiful. She had, and not all school districts will let you do this, but she had like a doTERRA, the diffuser with lavender. She had the shades on her lights so that it was like not as bright. She had plants around the room. I know, we're looking at our risk management. She had quiet music playing on the smart board. Just a very like biologically respectful space. And I go in and I just know all of those things because it's a different experience for students when they're in a space like that. Now we're going to get into, this is where, when we do this at the beginning of the day and we dose it throughout the day, we have the opportunity to gain up to 2 hours of focused learning time with students. This is across the board. This is any kind of touch and tactile. So in front of you, you have a packet that says these activities target specific sensory systems to help students regulate their attention and energy levels. You were talking about Gemini earlier. I co-created this with Gemini. I went in and entered what I wanted, and then I modified it, and then I modified it again, and I like fact-checked it to make sure that it was accurate before I brought it to you. But this is super helpful for classroom teachers. When you tell them about this, you have to give them an example of what it would look like in their classroom to do it. And they will ask, well, what kind of a time frame are we talking about here? How long do we need to do it? So we have found that 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of the day is a tremendous payoff for the child's ability to focus and whole class. In younger grades, I'm recommending the largest part of our body that receives sensory input is like our chest. So letting your littles be on the ground and do the Superman, like stretching out in Superman. And imagine what you're seeing as you're flying through the air. What do you see? And make it fun, make it a game as they're like building that core strength and they're getting all that sensory input. I was observing a kindergartner a couple weeks ago, and I watched him at stations, and he was writing really hard with his crayons, and then somebody wanted one, so he, instead of just handing it, he like slid it really hard across the table. And when he was closing his lid, he closed it down really hard. And then I shouted him out to recess, and all of his buddies were making baskets in the basketball hoop, but he was never able to make a basket, not even once. And at one point he got so angry, he went over with the basketball, and he was hitting it up against the building. And then I watched him as they were playing chase, and he was running, and he lost his balance, and he actually fell into the bark. And then I watched him come back in, and this was the part that was really fascinating to me. She had him at the corner of the carpet, and if you can imagine, so he's back here, he's kindergartner, and he's got his head, he's upside down on the carpet, and he's shoving his head into the carpet, and he's trying to get his chest down there at the same time. And he was still like, it was a U-fly lesson, so she was like, which words rhyme, and the beginning consonant sound. And even though he was down there, he was still like, hollering out the correct consonant sound he was hearing. But what he would do that for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then he was able to sit up and focus. And then he'd have to go back down and get that deep input and be upside down again. And then he could sit up and focus for a few minutes. It was fascinating. So what we're working on with him, of course, is he has a very underdeveloped vestibular system. His balance is off. He couldn't make a basket. He lost his balance and fell into the bark. He's got his head upside down. Those are all like indications that he needs vestibular work. So you see that packet I gave you, she's doing those things in the classroom with him and with a lot of other students. He also has an underdeveloped proprioceptive system. So she's doing things whole class that will give him that input as well. So this is up to 2 hours after, and when we say Under Armour, we mean like when we go skiing, we wear Under Armour underneath our ski suits because it's warm, but it also gives the body that input, like compression stockings. We ordered body socks for our sensory spaces, small, medium, and large, and we have students get into the body sock and then they stretch out like this. You have to ease them into it. But these are just examples, alerting. Light touch would be, have you ever done this where you say, okay, tell me when I get right there on your arm, and you go like this, and it's light touch. It's very alerting. It's very like, oh. So these are just some examples, and then in your packet you have additional examples. This proprioceptive, up to 4 hours, right? This is crazy. And I'm gonna share this short video because it's best told from a student, and this is through the eyes of a student, and of course adults made the video, but it's children telling it. But it really will give you, after you watch this video, you will look at your younger students very differently, and even some of your older students who will demonstrate some of these same behaviors. Again, my intention in sharing this with you is to give you a different set of lenses when you go into a space where children are misbehaving. I was in a different kindergarten classroom, and it was a male teacher, and he said, this little boy is so rude and so defiant. You're gonna come in and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. And I'm like, cool, well, yeah, what's going on? I'm sitting back and I'm watching. He's teaching a direct instruction lesson, and I'm watching this little guy, and he's in his chair, and he's part out of his chair, and then he's out of his chair, and he's on the ground, and he's on his chest. And he's so happy, he's calm, he's regulated, he's listening to the lesson, and then the teacher sees him on the ground and raises his voice and says, rude, defiant, turn your card. And this little kid is like, oh, and he, like completely unaware, was not being defiant at all. And so I was able to work with the teacher to say, hey, he's not being defiant at all. He's so sensory seeking. Like, did you see how he was on his stomach? He was trying to get input. So then we worked out a plan for that student, because if teachers don't understand this is happening, they will absolutely perceive it incorrectly. Does that make sense? So here's this short video, students, and it's pretty funny at the end. It makes me laugh every time.
You know how we keep checking our mouth when it's numb after a dentist visit? Well, if we can't feel a body part, it can totally distract us. And that's what happens when our proprioceptive system isn't up to speed. This important sensory system has receptors in our muscles, ligaments, and joints that are supposed to tell us where our body parts are and what they're doing, without looking at them. However, if this sensory system isn't fully awake, we gotta do something to help it out. Like tap our foot, if we're not sure where it is at the moment. So as long as we're tapping, we're good. But it's usually not too long before we hear,
Katie, stop that tapping.
Yet, as soon as we stop, we don't know where our foot is again. So we're back to thinking about that instead of focusing on what we're doing. When the proprioceptive system isn't doing its job, we like to chew on just about everything. Especially when we have to sit still or we're stressed about something. And it seems crazy, but it's like all the chairs in the world are slippery. But just to us. Here's what often happens. To pay better attention to a lesson, we begin rocking. With the rocking, we're now totally getting what the teacher is saying. But all that movement may then cause us to start to fall off the chair. If our proprioceptive system does its job, it sends a quick message to our brain to make an adjustment, which then keeps us on the seat. However, if we don't get that message in time, then before you know it, we slide right off the chair and onto the floor. When that happens, some of us are embarrassed, or some of us pretend that we fell on purpose to save some face. But the truth is, none of us know why we keep ending up on the floor. To make matters worse, we then get in trouble if others thought we were goofing around and not listening. Sad thing is, we actually fell because we were paying attention. The proprioceptive system also tells us how much pressure we need to do something. But if we're not getting that message, it can mess us up in a lot of ways. Without the right feedback, we might hold the pencil too tightly, or not tight enough. Or we might erase so hard, the paper rips. And people think we're not kind when we pet the dog too hard, or play too roughly with other kids. And if that weren't enough, people get annoyed when we touch everything we pass. But they'd do the same if they were blind or it was dark and they had to walk straight ahead. That's because touching the wall gives us a reference point.
This is me. This is a wall.
It's just that some of us need that reference point even when the lights are on. And there's more. With poor proprioception, we often invade everyone else's space. The problem is, we don't realize that we're in their space. Unfortunately, people often get annoyed with kids who lean, tap, chew, and touch things all the time. So it's good to know that it doesn't have to be that way. Not at all. We can totally wake up and improve our proprioceptive system. And while we're at it, we can have a whole lot of fun.
Does that give you a lens into some of the students that you see that are not misbehaving? And the sensory profile was created in utero, remember? So it's not like they're trying to get back at a teacher. It's not like they're trying to make anyone mad. If we do, and if we build these opportunities for input into our day, you see so many of your behaviors melt away. It has changed my world and it has changed my lens. When I'm in classrooms now, I can follow a student and it's like the lights were turned on for me and I can see it differently now. So I wanted to make sure to give you guys some time today to look at this. And now the next one is the vestibular system. This is 6 hours. Like after this kind of input, it gives kids up to 6 hours of focused attention. I mean, this is not like black and white, this is an average. But in your packet, you'll see they give lots of examples of whatever your grade span is, of examples of what we can do to give that vestibular input. Kids on the playground were getting their heads bonked on the tire swings that we had when I was principal, so all the teachers were like, you gotta take those tire swings down, they keep getting hurt, so I did. No, the tire swing gives them an opportunity to spin. In our sensory spaces, we have a sit and spin. Kids love to do that. In the middle of math class, I'll say, you know what, guys, we need a little break 15 minutes in. In fact, let's do this. Can we stand up right now where you are? If you'll just stand up with me. This is going to take like less than a minute. Slowly, just turn yourself in a circle to the right. And then once you're situated again, now turn yourself slowly to the left. All right, and we can have a seat. Something as simple as that is vestibular input to students who really need that, right? So again, just more examples of, did any of you ever watch Friends when Phoebe is running through Central Park and she runs into a horse? she's running like this through Central Park, but it's actually so freeing and it gives all of your joints and muscles like all this input that they need. It's so funny. All right. We're going to move through. So actually, the Jedi. We'll just do this part of it. So where you're sitting, if you just do this, some teachers will just abbreviate this. They'll say, "Okay, guys, we're just going to take some Jedi breaths," and they'll do this. Just take a couple of breaths. A second grader named this, by the way, because we were doing this in a lesson. He was like, "Oh, we all look like Jedi Knights." So that's a way to abbreviate it and not have the kids stand up to do it. But you can also have them stand up. So. This is the packet that I told you about. You guys all have it. So I want to give you some time right now. Which students did you think of? And based on the activities and the ideas in that packet, is there something you could do? Like, could you go back tomorrow or after the break and work with a teacher to say, hey, let's look at this child through a different set of lenses, like through a sensory, lens. And I just want you to talk with folks sitting at your table, like what kinds of things could you do to help students? We'll come back in about 5 minutes. So the hope is that these are conversations that started today and that you will use these resources when you are working with some dysregulated students, IEP or not, that these are some tools you can integrate into and you can help them understand themselves better. So many children shame themselves, and like you were talking earlier about the student that was sent away, it then becomes a part of like how they identify with themselves, that there's something wrong with them. And what I'm finding is that when you explain to kids that it's just that their sensory needs aren't being met, they're like, they'll say things like, "You mean there's nothing wrong with me?" Like, no, baby, there's nothing wrong with you. We just haven't been giving you the right kind of input. It changes everything. So now we're going to transition in our last time together. I'm going to share a tool with you that Deb got to learn about in Reno in the spring, and it is not rocket science. Anybody can understand it. I was on the phone talking with a friend of mine who is the vice principal at a K-8 campus. I was like, Debbie, her name's Debbie. I was like, you have to have this. So here we go. This is when I asked earlier if anyone was familiar with conscious discipline, Becky Bailey. It's more like a younger grade, primary kind of a focus. But this is one of her key tools where she talks about brain regions. I do want to give credit to her, and I do want to say again that they're morphed a little bit. We've renamed them a little bit because they line up with the language of the sequence of engagement in terms of brainstem, limbic, and cortex. But we know this. We already know this, right? When we can chase the why of a behavior and really like figure out what's going on under the surface, what's the antecedent, and if then we give ourselves time to pause, that in between the input and our response, when we pause, that's when we can be mindful to think, what does our student need most from us right now? That for me has been a game changer. So here's what it is, and basically, this is the easy one, right? You're in your cortex, you're like, woo, I'm ready to learn, I'm alert, I'm regulated, all is well. But if you're in your brainstem, and this is me hoping that you will have a different set of glasses on when you look at students' behaviors moving forward. When we have a student who's in their brainstem, their need is safety. Remember how we talked about they're terrified, they're fearful? This is where they're fearful. They're in the deep end of the swimming pool and they're drowning because they have forgotten how to swim because they are so out of touch with their cortex. They're down here in fear space. They're hiding, they're fighting, they may have withdrawn and they have disassociated in this place, or they might have like really aggressive physical reactions. there's usually not as much verbal when they're in this part of their brain. They normally are like, you might have like a loud, I'm gonna kill you, but then that'll be it. And then they'll like do some other things. This is where you get really verbal. And what they're wondering is, am I safe? Because they're in a state of fear, of deep fear. So that's what it looks like, that's what the unmet need is. And then you move up through the limbic region, this is the blue. Their need is for connection, imagine that. That's the relational area of the brain where we talk about how when you have a lot of relational insults, there's a lot of disorganization in that region. It's the back talk, right? Well, it's not fair. You let all the girls go, why don't we get to go? Or it'll be on the playground where like, they're not letting me play, and blah, 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 all that. Or it's back talk, it's sass, it's lots of verbal. It's because they're needing connection and they're wondering, am I loved, do I belong? Like that's the core need, that's the unmet need that we're seeing when you see students that are behaving like that. This is so disarming for me because now when I have kids that want to argue with me and want to be rude or defiant, I can just say in my head, oh, he's in his limbic region. I know how to move him from his limbic region up to his cortex. Here we go. But first, after knowing this, I'm going to engage your brain on the next slide with some examples. And I want you to, just in your own head, try to determine, are we in brainstem? Are we in limbic? Are we in cortex? Tim's hiding under the table with clenched fists. Brainstem. Serena is arguing about how she shouldn't be taken out of the game. It's not fair. Limbic. See, this is not rocket science, right? Adam's sitting at the carpet reading a book while it's time to do the calendar. I think he's kind of in between. What's that? He's cortex, but he's also a little bit like... What book? Oh. Are you reading a good book? We'd like to hear about it. No? Okay. Yeah, he's in his cortex. Jeremy accuses his teacher of always calling on the girls. Limbic. Brittany is screaming, stop it, to her classmates, and she's holding a book above her head. Brainstem, yeah. So now that you can kind of identify the behavior to the region of the brain, this is what Becky Bailey gives us as a way to help move that child from the lower region of the brain up into the cortex, where we know we'll have that smart part of them back, that reasoning part of them back. And it's DNA. Describe, name it, name it to tame it. We've all heard this. There's a lot of science behind it. And then acknowledge. So I'm going to give you an example of this. I was called out to a rural school for this second grader who kept eloping. So I'm in the room and they're doing a science project and I'm getting relational repertoire. I'm bonding with he and his group and I'm complimenting them and I'm on their level, and then there's a little girl crying across the way, so I go over, and I'd been in the room probably for 40 minutes. I go over to help this little other student, and I look up at the teacher in her jaw. She's like, he just eloped, Kelly. And I said, okay. I said, how can I help? She said, well, I can't go after him, and my administrator's off campus. I said, would you like me to go after him? She said, yes, please. So I walk out, and it was snowing that day, and he was probably from here to the wall, and he's at the drinking fountain, and he's kicking the building, and he's angry, and he's doing this, and all I did, let's just say his name's Logan. All I did, I stayed right here. I said, hey, Logan, I see you, buddy. I see you. I see your fists are clenched. I see you're kicking the wall. I see you, buddy. And then what do? I pause. And I got to take a breath because this teacher was pretty upregulated. And to me, she was like, can you go after him? Like she was up here. And so I had to, once I got outside, I had to pause to give myself a breath, to like lower my own stress response. And I take a deep breath. And I sent Logan love. And I sent him compassion. We know how contagious we are because of our mirror neurons. We know about grapes and cucumbers now, right? I sent him grapes. I sent him love and compassion. And in my head, I wished him well. I didn't do it out loud. This is all internal for the adult because we, as you pointed out, we all flip our lid from time to time. We all become upregulated from time to time. Once I'm calm, now I said to him, hey, buddy, and this is now I'm starting to walk closer to him. Hey, buddy, you seem really frustrated right now. You seem really frustrated and angry right now. I am. And I said, can you tell me more about that? Well, yeah, it was our turn, and the girls went. We were on our second bridge, and they took the pennies, and now they're doing their third bridge, and we were supposed to do our bridge, and they didn't give us the pennies, and they took them, and it's not fair. And I said, I bet you, I said, I hear exactly what you're talking about. I would be upset too. That's not fair. I can understand why you're frustrated right now, buddy. Hey, what if we went back inside, and I went with you, and we talked to the girls, and they gave you the pennies back, and then you and your partner took your turn? All right. So in we walked. It took all of about 3 minutes. What I just, and the teacher, again, her mouth dropped. She was like, it's always at least 30 minutes when he elopes before he can come back into the classroom. What did you do? And I said, look, I can't take credit for it. It's a tool from Becky Bailey. She's like, you cannot leave here today until you teach me that tool. And I did. I sat down with her when the kids went to lunch, and I just walked her through it. And then she held an emergency staff meeting so that the staff could learn it that week too, because she wanted them to have that same ability to recognize what's happening with the behavior and then to know what to say to help the student. Does it work all the time? Goodness, no. No approach does. This is just one other way of identifying a behavior and then understanding the why of it and then knowing what you can do. I will tell you, this is the trickiest part down here. Every time I'm with adults, the thing they want to do is they want to describe it down here. Pretend you're a movie reel and you're just describing what you see happening. You're not attaching any emotion. You're not attaching anything to it. I just told him, I see your fists are clenched. I see you're kicking the wall. Why do we do that? When you're in your brainstem, you have no idea what your body is doing. He wasn't even aware of the fact that he was kicking the wall. He was doing it out of anger. And it's like you detach, your physical body detaches from your mental and your physical, you detach. So when I'm describing for him, part of it is distraction, but part of it is bringing him back into his body to see what he's doing. Does that make sense? So I want you to try, in the time that we have, I want you to try this out, right? So if you get with a partner, or there can be 3 of you if there are 3 of you, but I want you to try, so this one says, or make it applicable to your grade level. You can create whatever, maybe it's something that just happened this week. But I want to give you time to practice saying these things out loud with somebody in the room. Describe what it is their body looks like, and then take a breath. Pause and take a breath for yourself and wish them well internally. And then try to name it to tame it. And then reflective listening. Tell them back what it is you heard them say and ask if there's a way you could solve it. Sound good? And on your slides, if you like this scenario better, you can go to the next page and you can do that one. But let's do that. Let's, for the next 5 minutes or so, let's practice so you each have a chance being the adult that talks them up into the upper region of their brain. Hopefully you had a moment to practice. And I'll tell you, I barely knew this system when I went after that little guy. But it was simple enough that I tried it out. And now I'm doing it with lots of students. And it's most of the time, unless it's a really extreme case, it's very effective. So the good news about us hanging out together is that today is not the only day that we get. So the content on these next few slides is all about the neurosequential model of education. So I'm going to take just a little bit of time when we get together virtually. You're going to receive an evaluation that gives feedback about today, and then what next? What would you like to go deeper with? What would you like to know more about? Maybe there's something we didn't talk about today and you would like to address it. Then I will bring that research, I will bring those tools the next time we meet. And then to get you to lunch on time, this is our intentional closing. Remember how we talked about coming full circle. And this is turn and talk to a neighbor, what was helpful, something that inspired you. You can talk about any one of these things. It's just a way of you reflecting back on the sequence of engagement, on co-regulation, on sensory profiles, on brain states, brain regions, and what worked. What are you taking with you today that was like an aha or an epiphany, or maybe it was just a great reminder. So I just want to give you time right now to turn and talk to someone and process that. And thank you for hanging out with me this morning. I loved my time with you.